Hi, my name is Fazil and I'm indie game developer, but today I want to tell you how I created my latest work, Cottage. It all started after indie showcase at Game Access conference. I decided to take a little break from game development and make a new work for my portfolio. I found this cozy stylized concept art on ArtStation by Pixelcat. I was very inspired and decided to make a similar scene in engine. The first thing I did was to set up the landscape material in the engine. It's a simple landscape material with the possibility to blend two maps in one layer. The next thing I did was the grass. In my project I use real-time virtual textures, so the grass blends nicely with the landscape material, but for more contrast I added a gradient on top of the grass, and I also added these black lines that create a wind effect. This is a trick I learned from Agbutea. I'll leave a link to all the tutorials in the description of this video. The next step was to create the trees. In Blender I sculpted the bark of a pine tree. After that I baked it in Substance Painter and did simple texturing. Later I made the leaves in Blender. I also learned this from Agbutea in her tutorial video. Next I set up the camera and made a blocking of the house. For wooden and metal beams I decided to use trim sheet, so I did the sculpting in Blender and baked it in Substance Painter. But my graphics tablet didn't allow me a good curved lines in the sculpting. You can see it here. So I decided to use the curve function in Blender. It gave me a good result. This may be useful for people who don't have a graphics tablet or don't have a good one. This time I got a good result. The texturing of the trim sheet was simple. You can see all the layers and settings on the screen. For the house walls, I created a material like this in Substance Designer. It combines two materials, concrete and bricks. I output them separately to use mesh paint in the engine and get this blending result anywhere I want. For the roof, I created a material in Substance Painter and added parallax occlusion to it in Unreal Engine. This way, I didn't have to make the roof tiles as separate parts of the mesh. At the same time, I can customize tiling in real time. For the stone and bricks, I made sculpting, baking and texturing as before. Nothing new or complicated here, but for stone I made possibility to customize RVT value by gradient. This also gives me a good flexibility in customizing assets in the scene. For the other parts of the house, like the concrete pillars and the arc, I decided to not make separate sculpting for each one. Instead, I used edge decals. To do this, you need to make the edge sculpting once, bake damaged edges in normal map, after that create a material in the engine. I also added the possibility to customize the tiling of the decals. It gives me great flexibility in creating modular edge damage, and it saves a lot of time on creating and baking normal maps for each individual mesh. I will leave a link to the tutorial in the description. For the bushes I used the same material as for the pine leaves. Thanks to the billboard setting I can control the size of the bushes. For the flowers I use an atlas created in Photoshop. The link to Agbutea's tutorial on creating flowers you will also find in the video description. In the scene I'm using a simple water material. I added planar reflections for more correct reflections in the water. To do this you need to enable this option in the project settings. This is not necessary as it affects the performance on the scene, but it looks good. For the road and beach material I made the grass automatically resize. When the grass is close to the road it goes underground. This gives me a great soft transition when blending landscape layers. I learned it from Prismatica tutorials. For the scene lighting I use directional light, skylight and blueprint sky sphere just for background. The main feature I decided to use Lumen in my scene, and I have one note that may be useful for you. For example, Lumen doesn't work well with grass in the shade. Grass starts to be covered with strange dark spots. If you change global illumination to something else, this problem disappears. But if you look at other places, Lumen works better than other global illumination options. For post-processing, I use these settings. And finally, for rendering, I created a post-process material for more sharpness in the scene, because in normal rendering the engine blurs the picture, but with these materials your render remains sharp. I will leave a link to the material in the video description. I think I have told about the main features of my latest work. Stuff about how to sculpting and modeling you can learn in the other tutorials in YouTube. As an indie game developer, I try to optimize the process of producing assets. That's why I spent most of time in this video to show main features in my scene. I hope this breakdown will be useful for you. I ask you to subscribe on my ArtStation and support my works with a like. And also please subscribe to this channel and come to the streams where you can ask your questions. I will be glad to see you all. Thanks for your attention and bye!